Welcome to Cars Yeah, show number 326.
This is Cars Yeah, where you'll enjoy interviews with inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Mark Green is here to provide you with a fuel injection of automotive inspiration. So get in, sit down, buckle up, and get ready for a wild ride here on Cars Yeah.
Do you know the best way to protect your vehicle, both the exterior and interior, is with a car cover? I've been using Covercraft car covers since 1975. It's a fast, easy, and inexpensive way to keep your vehicle looking new. 2015 marks Covercraft's 50th anniversary. They've manufactured premium quality exterior and interior covers here in the United States with a reputation for durability and design. They're the world's largest manufacturer of custom patterned vehicle covers that are crafted to fit, with over 80,000 patterns and growing. You can choose from dozens of fabric options and accessories, all designed and carefully sewn for your special vehicle. Made in the USA, Covercraft is the right choice. I've protected my special rides with their covers for over 40 years, and you should too. Learn more today at covercraft.com. Hello, automotive enthusiasts. I am revved up and so excited to introduce today's very special guest, Ed Gilbertson. Ed, are you buckled up and ready for a fun ride?
I'm always ready for a fun, fast ride to unknown destinations, Mark.
All right. I'll promise that I'll keep it off the walls and between the lines today.
That's a deal.
All right. Ed Gilbertson has been active in the car hobby for over 40 years. He's the Chief Judge Emeritus for Pebble Beach Concours de Elegance and continues to serve as a senior member of the Pebble Beach Selection Committee. He's also the Chief Judge Emeritus for the Palm Beach Cavallino Classic and the Ferrari Club of America. In addition, he was Chief Judge for the Legend of Motorcycle International Concours and multiple shows across the country. Ed is Founder and Chairman Emeritus of the International Advisory Council for the Preservation of the Ferrari Automobile and contributing editor for Cavallino magazine and other publications. Plus, he's co-authored a book on the Ferrari 250 GT Spyder California. Ed is one busy guy. So Ed, I've told our listeners just a little bit about you. Would you take a moment and share a little bit more about your career and your passion for automobiles?
Well, thank you, Mark. I guess I'm fond of saying the automobile hobby is a terminal disease. Lifelong pursuit of mine, both cars and motorcycles. I had my first motorcycle at age 11.
Wow.
And my car at age 13. I bought them with my paper route money and selling ice cream bars. Neither ran at the time. I think that's why my parents let me have them. They never thought I would get them running. Well, I managed to get them both running and have been pretty heavily involved in the hobby ever since. And before then, of course, it being a lifelong interest, I was putting soapbox derby racers together and building little scooters with apple boxes and roller skate wheels and things like all sorts of things like that before I even had a motorized vehicle. So
very cool. Well, you've come a long way, baby, because you have been involved in so many different aspects of concours event preservation. So tell me a little bit about how you got involved with that before we get into some of the questions.
Well, you know, I'm often asked that question, Mark, and it really relates back to the first time I showed a couple of my cars in concours events, and this was back in the 70s. Mm-hmm. And I never really intended to get involved in judging, never intended to get involved in organizing all of the kind of events that we've done through the years. But as I went from show to show, and even then I was interested in keeping things original and authentic, but there basically were no standards, there were no consistent guidelines. As and I went from one show to another, sometimes the people knew what they were doing, sometimes they didn't, often had no guidelines to go by. Who wants to volunteer today to judge, you know? It was really loosey-goosey back in those days. And I finally said, something's got to be done about this. And got general agreement. Yes, Ed, something needs to be done. Well, we waited for somebody to grab the reins and put some effort into coming up with some standards and consistency. Nobody did, and so a couple of people said, why don't you do it, Ed?
There you go. Be careful what you ask for. You might just get it.
Indeed. This was like 40 years ago, and so I developed some judging forms and judging guidelines for a couple of local events here in the San Francisco Bay Area for the Ferrari Club because I was active with that group, and it grew from there. I never envisioned that 40 years later I would still be involved in judging and concours guidelines and all those sorts of things, but it's been a long but a good journey, and with the help and support of a lot of people, I think we've made some progress through the years.
I think so, absolutely. Well, as we continue on your journey, I always like to start by asking my guests for a success quote. Something that's been instrumental in forming your life and your success. It's a really great way to get the inspirational tires turning here on Cars Yeah. So, Ed, take the wheel.
Well, I think the biggest and best thing that ever happened to me was meeting my wife, Sherry. She was not only a great gal and checked all the boxes as far as a wife and partner, but she's a motorhead just like I am.
Oh, lucky guy.
That's what a lot of people tell me. And for 40 years that I've been at this, every event, every tour we've put together, everything we've been to, she's been alongside of me. In fact, so much so that whenever I appear and she's not there, the first thing people do is say, where's Sherry? And an interesting story in meeting her, I met her through a friend of mine who unfortunately is no longer with us. He denies it, but I wasn't really looking for anybody at the time. I mean, I had girlfriends and dates and so forth, but this friend of mine, he got together some people one evening, and it turned out that of everybody there, they all had a wife or a significant other, except Sherry and I were there by ourselves, and so we naturally wound up talking to each other. Mm-hmm. And never left her. I found out years later, because I was pretty heavy into the biker world at that time, which is another big chunk of my life, and found out years later that some of my best buddies had warned Sherry away from me and told her that she would never housebreak me. I was having a lot of good times in those days.
Yeah.
So I was quite surprised myself that evening I met her that I just described, and we have been with each other ever since, and just 2 days ago we celebrated our 44th anniversary.
Oh my goodness, well congratulations.
We basically share everything together, and we were in business together as general partners. We actually had 3 businesses together. She has been a real assist to me because, as you might imagine, while I'm out there working things concours and judging wise, there's a lot of paperwork behind the scenes associated with those sorts of things. Putting together a 1,000-mile driving tour, we have done a number of those for cars like the Alfa Romeo 8Cs, the Ferrari 250 Testarossas, the Ferrari 250 GTOs. Well, they take a lot of time, and Sherry handles all of that, plus I dare say she can put together the best route instructions anywhere.
Well, I would say then the story here is, or the mantra or success quote would be, pick the right partner.
Boy, that's critically important. I am so lucky, I really am, because to find somebody that you can share your life with, and that all these years later, we still enjoy being around each other, and she is interested in the same things I am. I mean, I'm just so lucky I can hardly believe it.
Well, you two are very fortunate. My wife Jill and I will be celebrating our 31st, so we've got a little catching up to do to you guys.
Well, that's still a long time. Congratulations to you. It sounds like you found a good one also.
She's put up with me for a long time, that's for sure. You talked about when you were a little kid buying those vehicles when you were real young, but could you share a story with me that instigated your passion for cars? I'd love to hear that pivotal moment as you remember it, when you really realized that you were a car and a motorcycle guy.
Well, I tell you, I thought you might ask something like that, Mark, and I thought about when the light came on.
Yes.
Far back as I can go, even at this late stage, I have a pretty good memory. I mean, I can actually remember back to when I was 3 years old.
Oh, my gosh.
I clearly can. I had my tonsils out when I was 3, and I can clearly remember exactly what happened and what I had to eat and other things that happened when I was a small child. And even then, I was interested in having the little cars in the sandbox and laying out roads and putting them in little boxes for a gas station and things like that. And then when I was old enough to get out of the sandbox, I guess, like I mentioned earlier, I'd build these vehicles out of scrap pieces. I'd take an apple box, I'd nail it to a 2x4, I'd get a couple of old roller skate wheels or something and nail them on the bottom of the 2x4, and I had a scooter.
Very cool.
And then when I was 11 years old, I was eligible to enter the Soapbox Derby, the old series of those sorts of races for kids. Mm-hmm. A lot of the kids had, you were supposed to do the work yourself, and I did it. I was always chagrined that a lot of cases, the fathers would build the cars or they would have their business build the cars. I did those myself, and I built 3 of them. And by that time, of course, I was getting to the age where I was getting interested in not building a little soapbox derby racer that coasted down a long hill, but I wanted something with a motor in it.
Of course.
So that's why I saved up my paper route money and ice cream bar money. I couldn't afford anything that cost much because I didn't have that. And I come from quite humble beginnings. My parents couldn't assist. That first motorcycle was $30. And that first car was $50.
There you go.
And it all started there. And so when people tell me, they've asked that before, well, when did you really get interested that, led you down this path of just devoting your life to this? I wind up saying the same thing. I was born with it, and that's why I say it's a terminal disease. So I guess it's...
Yeah, that's something I hear from a lot of my guests, and I think you and I both share that is a terminal disease. So not a bad disease to have, though.
Not a bad one to have.
Yeah. So, Ed, what I'd love to do now is take a look at some of the roads you've driven down. You've had such a long, wonderful life around the car hobby and vehicles and things, and I'd love for you to share with our guests, our listeners rather, a huge challenge or even a great failure that you faced along the way. It's something that really tested you, really pushed you to some limits there. And the most important part of this has to do with how did you overcome that particular situation and what did it teach you?
Well, as I said, I was born into the car and motorcycle world. It's been with me all my life. I think if we can just move over to the motorcycle world for a very brief time, because we're here to talk about my automobile life. I was in the biker life for quite a few years, and I can tell you I was the president of a club, and that was a challenge because the clubs, as you may know, get very territorial. There's a leading club in each state. They lead the charge. You need to know that world. You need to be able to wend your way through it. And I was in it for a long time, running with the clubs. I was president of a club for many years. Well, like I often say, when you're in Rome, you need to do as the Romans do or stay the hell out of Rome. And so running a motorcycle club, and it worked out well. I loved it. But, you have to move on. There's other things to do. That was definitely the greatest challenge I've had. I learned a lot running a motorcycle club and had a great time, loved it, could have continued it, but that's a far different side of life.
Yeah.
And, the automobile world is completely different. The biker world is a challenge, and you can learn a lot. It's like being in the military and leading a unit. You can learn a lot about people and how to organize, how to lead, how to take care of problems. So it was a good learning experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very interesting, very intriguing. I didn't know that about you, so very cool. Let's shift gears here and go to the other end of the spectrum. I'd love for you to share what I like to call a career aha moment. Sometime when the headlights came on and illuminated your way for a new idea or a new direction you had in the car world, the car hobby, and tell us the steps you took to turn your aha moment into your success.
Well, I can clearly remember that moment, Mark. As I said earlier, when I showed my cars back in the 70s and there was the need to develop some standards and consistency in the Concours judging process, and I developed some forms and guidelines for the local Ferrari group, and then a couple of the local shows used them. But it was pretty much right in the immediate area where I live, the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. And in 1984, the Monterey Historics and Pebble Beach decided that they would feature Ferrari. And I was on the board of the Ferrari Owners Club at the time, which was the Ferrari Club here in California. The Ferrari Club of America came later. Mm-hmm. Anyway, those of us who were involved with the Ferrari Owners Club, we said, well, gee, they're featuring Ferrari up at Monterey, and we need to have a presence. We need to do something. And John Masterson was the president of the club at that time. I think I was vice president, and so we said, yes, we've got to come up with something if they're going to be honoring Ferrari. Well, what we decided to do is we would do some things out at Laguna Seca, as it was called in those days, and in the way of track activity, and also we would do something in the way of having a show, the Concours. And so John said, I will take the track, and you've already been involved in Concours and judging. You've developed some judging materials. Why don't you take the Concours? I said, done. And so we didn't know what this was going to come to. Sherry, of course, was already working alongside me on everything we do. And so we looked for a place, and we chose the Rancho Cañada Golf Club over there on Carmel Valley Road. And we got it because, as it turned out, the manager was a car guy, so that worked out well.
Cool.
Without going on too long, I developed some entry forms. I hadn't really done anything that was very significant at all outside of a small club event, a small local show. And so we had the field. I had started developing the judging forms and guidelines that have survived all the way to this day and are used many places. But they didn't really exist at that time. But because this was a meet that was going to involve the both clubs, I contacted some people in the Ferrari Club of America, which was basically a Great Lakes organization at the time, because I wanted to let both clubs know that we were going to try and have something special. Develop some entry forms and, okay, we'll see who's interested. Well, the entry forms started coming in, and all of a sudden, we're sitting here with a whole bunch of entry forms. I said, well, boy, I'm going to have to need quite a few judges here. And I had some local judges I could call upon. But I started calling people out of the blue because I didn't know them. I'd seen their names in articles and books, and called people like Phil Hill and Briggs Cunningham and Luigi Canetti and, a whole raft of people just picking names and had no idea how they would respond. Well, long story short, they all came and said they would come.
Yeah.
Of course, it was going to be a big Ferrari deal, so they might have been coming anyway, but they were willing to take their time and come over and help me at the Concours. And so I remember that Sherry and I went over to the field the day before, and we kind of laid out things, looks like we may have a few cars. Where are we going to put the race cars? Where are we going to put the GT specialities, things like that? We kind of laid out a rough outline of the field. And then we got up very early the next morning, and we said to ourselves, I wonder if anybody will really show up. Probably...
Yeah.
Sherry and I go over to Rancho Cañada Golf Club, and we drive up. The first car in line is a Ferrari P4.
Wow.
The second line is a Ferrari 250 Testarossa, and it went on from there. And by the time that we had gotten everybody in, there were 250 Ferraris sitting on the field. It was the largest gathering of Ferraris ever to that time.
Cool.
And God, I had lined up a lot of judges. They were standing by to help out, and that meet was very successful in getting the word out as to what I was trying to do.
Sure.
To establish standards and consistency in the judging world. It got both clubs involved. I had judges from both clubs, quite a few of them from the Ferrari Club of America who I'd never met because they were basically the big national club and they were more concours oriented.
Sure.
And of course we had a lot of those cars over at the track, and so that event got a lot of publicity. The Ferrari Club of America called me and indicated that they had some of their people had been out to this event, had really talked favorably about it, and it wasn't the president of the Ferrari Club of America calling me. It was the fellow that was going to be in charge of their next national meet concours that's held in conjunction with their annual meet, and he was interested in me being their chief judge.
Cool.
I said, well, gee, I'm really not active with the Ferrari Club of America. This is Ferrari Owners Club out here. Are you sure that's going to go over? Well, he talked to the board about it, and the president of the Ferrari Club of America at that time, a fellow by the name of Carl Conway, the Concours chairman, got back to me, and I said, well, how'd it go? He said, there's no way in hell we're going to have the president of the Ferrari Owners Club come over and judge our cars at our national meet. Are you nuts? And but he persisted. And the vice president of the club, Joe Rosenberg, I think it was, doesn't really matter. This was a long time ago, obviously. But he said the same thing. He calls me and he said, I understand you've been invited to be our chief judge at the next annual meet. I said, yeah, I have. But I understand your president isn't real keen. He says, well, if he's not keen, I'm 100% against it. We're going to have the president of the other club come over and judge our cars.
Right.
Well,
wow.
The Concours chairman, who's one of my oldest friends at this point, didn't know him at the time, Bob Coggan, persisted. And so Carl Conway, the president of the FCA, calls up. He said, look at Gilbertson. He says, Bob keeps persisting. What I'm going to do, got to come out to the West Coast on business anyway. I'm going to come out. We're going to meet. I'm going to get to know you. You're going to tell me all about you, and you're going to tell me why you feel you can judge our cars. And so he came out. We had him at the house. Sherry cooked her favorite meal. She makes the best lasagna in the world. And at the end of the evening, Carl Conway, who was totally against it, at the beginning of the evening, he said at the end of the evening, okay, we'll give it a try. Once that show was over, both Carol Conway and Joe called me and said, we were wrong, you were right. We're going to take it up with the rest of the board. Would you like to become our permanent chief judge for the Ferrari Club of America?
Nice.
And that was it. And I was their chief judge. Back in those days, it was pretty loosey-goosey, even in the Ferrari Club. But who wants to judge the cars this year? And there were no, and then they would use whatever forms and guidelines they wanted. So I came on board as the chief judge for the Ferrari Club of America in 1985. The following year, I brought the forms and guidelines that I'd used at that big '84 international meet that had been received so well. They implemented them throughout the club and other Ferrari places, like the later on the Palm Beach Cavallino Classic, which came along in the 90s. And then when I became chief judge at Pebble Beach, those same forms and guidelines, which had been well time tested, were implemented for all classes at Pebble Beach, where they still use them today. So that was my aha moment, because I said to Sherry at the time, I said, I got into this because we were dissatisfied with what was happening locally. Sort of standardization and consistency needs to be implemented throughout certainly the Ferrari world, which was my world at the time, and it can be used in other places and other shows. And I said, look, it was well received at the 84 meet by all kinds of people that I'd never met before. They're running with it. The Ferrari Club of America likes it. I think we can take this thing quite a way, Sherry. And that's what really got me rolling down that road. I said, this has the potential to go a long way. These forms and guidelines we've developed, it's going to do the world a lot of good in terms of fair and consistent judging, and let's see where we can go with it.
Yeah.
And 40 years later, it's used for all of the classes at Pebble Beach. It's used for the Palm Beach Cavallino Classic. It's used at many other shows, both here and other countries. So,
fantastic. Yeah.
So I'm glad we made that decision. I'm glad we had that aha moment.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll give Sherry's Lasagna some credit for making all that happen as well. So,
well, she's quite a charmer too.
There you go. How about proudest moments? I would assume you've had so many, but could you share just one with us that's happened along the way?
I think that my proudest moment is when I was invited by Piero Ferrari to come to Maranello, Italy, to be the chief honorary judge for the 60th anniversary of Ferrari at the first concours that the factory had ever held.
Wow.
And they brought me over there for 10 days. Adolfo Orsi was the chief judge, and I knew him well because he had judged for me at the Pebble Beach and the Cavallino Classic and lots of other places. And so we worked for 10 days to put that big 60th anniversary event together, and it was wonderful. I mean, obviously, when you go out from the Ferrari factory and say you're going to have a concours, you're going to bring in significant cars. We basically had our pick of the cars. We had our pick of the judges, and you have people like Mauro Figuieri and Sergio Scaglietti and Sergio Pininfarina and all sorts of people there on the field with you. We had the Formula One cars there with the drivers, and it was just fabulous.
Wow!
And then they had this big banquet gala, like a lot of the shows do, out at the Fiorano track, which of course we were invited to, and they have the normal reception. And we're standing there with Brenda Werner. That was Enzo Ferrari's personal secretary. And this was not too many years ago, 60th anniversary. That was, well, let's see, Ferrari started in 47. That had to be 2007, that 60th anniversary. So we're standing there with Brenda Werner, and pretty soon we're saying, well, gee, we probably ought to find a place to sit. And Brenda says, stand by, I'll find us a table. And so we go and sit down and sitting there jawing away, and I get a tap on the shoulder. And I turn around and says, are you Mr. Gilbertson? I said, yes, it's my wife, Sherry. We're here with Brenda. He says, no, you're sitting elsewhere. I said, well, this is just fine. No, you're sitting at the head table. You're sitting next to Piero Ferrari.
Oh, wow.
I looked at Brenda, and I said, this can't be. This certainly can't be. Sherry says, I'll check it. Let me go over and see if there's any on the table. She came back. She said, I can't believe it. We're sitting with Piero Ferrari and his wife. That, I suppose, was my proudest moment, because I had started as a nobody, basically, and here I am sitting at the head table with Piero Ferrari and the other factory dignitaries at the top of the Ferrari world at their 60th anniversary.
Wow. Well, that's a wonderful story. Very well deserved. Fantastic. All right, let's have a little bit of fun here. What was your first really special car? And if you could share a memory you have with that vehicle.
I guess that would have to be my first car, Mark, the one that I stretched with paper route money to get for $50. It didn't run. This was in the 50s, the early 50s, and it was a 40 Ford, and the hot rod days were there, and I built that little car into a hot rod as best I could with my limited funds. I often wished I had that car, but that was a special car. That's where I learned how to make an engine run. That's where I learned how to work on other things car-wise, and yeah, I remember that car. That was special and still is special to me.
Very cool. I love that. Well, let's talk about other cars here. Is there one car in particular that you've owned, that you let go, you sold, you really wish you had back in your garage?
Well, but I would have to say no. I've been at this a long time. I've been fortunate to be able to have my dream cars along the way. I was fortunate that I was going after those early V12 Ferraris in the 70s and early 80s when they were affordable.
Right.
And I never bought the cars for what they might be worth. I buy cars and motorcycles because I want to enjoy them. If I treat them well, I keep everything running, and if when it comes time to sell, they're worth more, well, fine. They've been good to me. But I never buy my cars to sell, and I have all of my cars for quite a long time and do everything I wanted with them, you know, in the way of all of the activities. And so when it comes time to sell, I'm ready to sell. And, of course, there's a space in the garage, and pretty soon it's filled with something else.
Yes, absolutely. You know, I loved your answer to that question because that is so important that we buy cars that we love, because if you're going to get stuck with them, maybe you want to make sure you enjoy them. So you answered that question really well. Now, here's a very introspective question for you, Ed. I'm really curious how you'll answer this one.
Okay.
If Ed was a car, what kind of car would you be and why?
Oh, my gosh. You know, that's a Shelby 427 Cobra.
Ooh.
You know, I'm interested in hot rods, motorcycles, and sports racing cars. And that 427 Cobra is all of them rolled into one.
Yeah.
That's the car I would be if I was a car.
Absolutely. I love that answer, too. That was a great answer. In fact, you sent me a picture of you in one of those vehicles, a blue one, I believe, right?
That's my Shelby Cobra.
There you go. Okay, well, that'll be on your show notes page for our listeners to enjoy. So,
I love that. People expect me to, you know, mention a Ferrari.
Yeah.
And I love Ferrari, and I'm still very involved with the Ferrari world. But all things considered, no. I'm often said, if you could only keep one of your cars, which one would it be? Well, I say that's a no-brainer. It'd be the Cobra.
The Cobra. I love it. Well, Ed, up next is the last lap. But before we put the pedal to the metal, let's say thank you to today's car sponsor. Have you turned your key and heard that dreaded tick, 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 tick because of a dead battery? No worries. I've got the NOCO Genius Boost Jump Starter. This compact tool fits in your glove box and features rechargeable lithium battery technology that will start a dead battery in your car, boat, truck, or RV. It packs a whopping 12-volt, 400-amp starting power and can start up to 20 dead batteries on a single charge. Plus, it has built-in spark-proof technology with reverse polarity protection to safely jumpstart your vehicle. The compact, ergonomically designed clamps are solid copper for maximum conductivity, and there's a built-in ultra-bright dual LED flashlight with 7 modes, including an SOS emergency strobe. It's easily rechargeable with a USB outlet, and you can charge your smartphone or tablet while you're on the road. Works on any 12-volt lead-acid battery. The Genius Boost from NOCO is the ultimate emergency tool that's safe and easy to use. Quality design, state-of-the-art technology from NOCO, your battery care source since 1914. Get yours at geniuschargers.com. All right, Ed, we're back, and we're entering the last lap. And this is where I'm going to fire off a series of questions and ask you to give our listeners some really quick blips of the throttle answers. So you ready?
I'm ready. I will try and keep the wordage down.
All right. What is the best automotive advice you've ever received?
The best advice: when you go after a car, buy it because you're enjoying it, not because other people are buying that car, not because of what it might be worth someday. Buy it and enjoy it.
Great.
And that's what I've always done.
Great advice. Could you share one of your personal habits that you believe has helped contribute to your success over the years?
Never give up. Once I established an objective, I simply don't give up. If I can't achieve it one way, I'll find another way. And I simply never give up. Sometimes maybe to my own detriment, but I've been fairly successful in what I wanted to accomplish in life, both in the car world and in the corporate world.
Oh, perfect. Love it. Do you have a resource that you think our listeners would really enjoy? Maybe it's a website or an application you get or something like that?
Well, for the Ferrari world, we have this organization that I founded back in the 80s, the International Advisory Council for Preservation of the Ferrari Automobile. I would also mention that I'm just in the process of establishing what we're calling International Chief Judge Advisory Group, and that will be to further provide advice assistance to the Concours world in providing fair and consistent judging. And I've been doing that pretty much on my own, except for Ferraris with that council. But this is a newly formed group, and like the other group, the International Advisory Council for Ferraris, this one is comprised of charter membership of 9 experienced chief judges from 5 countries. We will have a website. The formation of that group will be announced shortly, and we will be available to assist, provide advice for any organizer or chief judge out there or anybody else that is interested in the subject.
Ah, excellent. Great. I love it. Now, how about a book? I know this is a tough one, but is there one book in particular you think our listeners would really enjoy reading?
Well, I think it's perhaps one I would like them to read. It's the book that was published by the Simeon Foundation a couple of years ago, and it's called The Stewardship of Historically Significant Automobiles. You know, the big word today is preservation. People have really jumped on that horse. I've been a champion of preservation for a long time. Somebody sent me an article I wrote years ago. I'd almost forgotten about it, talking about preservation versus restoration. But Fred Simeon got a hold of a few of us, myself, Miles Collier, the Kino brothers, people who have a keen interest in preservation, but we were all kind of marching down our separate roads, although we knew each other and talked with each other. And Fred thought, what I would like you guys to do, you champions of preservation, is each sit down, write a chapter for this book, giving your thoughts regarding preservation, the importance, et cetera, et cetera. We'll put it in our book, we'll put it out there, and we'll see what the world thinks of it. And so we did. Well, that book went over so well that it won the International Historic Motor Award for the best publication in 2013.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, Fred Simeon's been a guest here on Cars Yeah, and we talked a little bit about that book as well when he was on the show. So we'll make sure that that book and all the great books that the past 326 guests here on Cars Yeah have introduced on the guest recommended books page on carsyeah.com. You can find everything that Ed shared with us at carsyeah.com/Ed Gilbertson. Just put Ed in the search bar and his show notes page will pop right up. All right, Ed, we're coming up to the checkered flag here, and this last question can be a real doozy. If you could only have one collector car in your garage, but don't worry about the cost, because today I'm going to write that check.
Okay.
What would that one vehicle be and why?
Oh, I know that one. Yeah, I've held this opinion for a while. If I could only have one car, it would be the Cobra Daytona Coupe that won the World Championship.
Oh, my goodness. Well, what is it? What is it about that car that just tugs on your heart?
Well, I'll tell you, it's such a great story. You know, Carroll Shelby and his hot rod buddies, developed the Cobra down in Southern California. Nobody knew where it was going to go. I don't think they did. And they built these world beater cars. And the Ferrari 250 GTOs loved those cars. I mean, they had won the championship 3 years in a row, and Carroll Shelby came along with his Cobra Daytona Coupe, and he beat them all.
Yes.
I think that is such a great story. American hot rodders, go world racing and win the championship. I think it's just a wonderful story. So that's the car, and I've seen that car, and that's the one I would pick, and I wouldn't have to have anything else.
Well, great choice. We had Peter Brock on this show very early on in the formation of Cars, yeah, and Peter talked quite a bit about how he worked on that project and how that car came together. So that's a great choice. I could see you, an old hot rodder, driving that car down the road. Absolutely.
I must tell you something. This is such a great story, and I'm taking too much time. But you perhaps remember, not too many years ago, we featured the Ferrari GTOs at Pebble Beach.
Oh, yes.
And I was bound and determined it was going to be the largest number ever seen together. And, of course, I'd been in the Ferrari world a long time, and I knew a lot of people, and put all my feelers out, called my markers in, and as I recall, we had 23 GTOs sitting along the ocean at Pebble Beach, the most that everybody had ever seen together.
Oh, yeah.
And that long line of GTOs was spectacular. But what a lot of people don't know is that the Cobra that beat them all was an entry in the post-war sports class that was just a short distance away from that long line of GTOs in the ocean. Here's the way we did it. First of all, the chairman and I had talked about going to have that long line of GTOs along the ocean, and I said to the field workers, when you're finished, I want to go down at the end of that line. I want to look down. I want to see a perfectly straight line, and they did a fabulous job. That photograph appeared all over the world. But you'll be one of the few people to know that we took that Cobra, we put it in that class not too far from the GTOs, facing down in the GTOs, and I love that. I said, GTOs are so proud and prim and, proud of themselves today, and looking right across from them for a short distance away was the lone day Cobra Coupe that beat them all. And I feature that Cobra saying, okay, preen on, you guys. Just remember, I beat every damn one of you in the old days.
Oh, that is a fantastic story. I love that. I was there on the lawn. That was a spectacular event. I was there at Laguna Seca to watch all those cars go around the track. It was absolutely stunning. So
it was, wasn't it?
Great job. Great job. Ed, you have taken me on a great ride. I knew you would. I've so enjoyed your stories, and I really want to thank you for sharing your lifelong journey around cars with the Cars Yeah listeners and with me. Could you give us one parting piece of guidance before you drive off into the sunset in that Cobra Daytona Coupe?
Yes, and it's one that I put out there all of the time. Let's always remember that cars are meant to be driven and motorcycles are meant to be ridden.
Absolutely. And what's the best way for our listeners to learn more about you and what you're doing and what you're involved in?
Well, I'm quite easy to get a hold of. My email address is edgilbertson, one word, at AOL.com, or they're welcome to call me at 415-824-6129. But I'll just give fair warning, be prepared to have me talk your ear off.
Be prepared to have a wonderful conversation is what I'd like to add to that. Listeners, you can find links to everything Ed had shared with us today, again, at carsyeah.com. Just put Ed in the search bar and his show notes page will pop right up. Ed, thank you again for being so generous today with your time and your expertise and for sharing your experiences with me and the listeners. Until we talk again, I'll see you down the road.
Thank you, Mark. It's been a pleasure, and it was just enjoyable to relive some of the things all over again.
The pleasure was all mine.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's ride here at Cars Yeah. Drive on over to carsyeah.com to find show notes and inspiring automotive fun. Download your free copy of Filler Up, a fun book filled with gorgeous photographs of fuel filler fun, including quotes from more inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Download your copy today, and we'll see you next time on Cars Yeah.